So there's something really important I wanted to talk about today. And that is that recently, quite a few people have been offering to donate money to the retreat center, sort of sponsorship or something like that. And first, I just want to thank you for your incredible kindness, and it's such a lovely thought. But please, please don't think like that. And even if you try to give me some money, then I'm not going to take it from you. And is that because supporting the Dharma is not a virtuous thing? No, it's not that. But primarily, this is because the main reason why Dharma centers fail is because of karmic debt. This thing I talked about the other day, karmic debt. And from their very inception, then generally they start off by fundraising and asking people for favors. And this generates a lot of karmic debt. And karmic debt is a huge obstacle to a meditation retreat. You have to be very, very careful with karma because karma is infallible. Now, you might not even believe in karma, cause and effect. So this might be something that's a bit difficult for you to swallow. So I'm just going to sort of talk about it in very everyday, mundane terms. So the analogy I'm going to use is of a Chinese student of Buddhism. And the reason why I'm going to use this analogy is because it's really, really common. So in China then, you know that for many years religion was made illegal. And Buddhism is kind of the home religion of China. So all religion was made illegal, the temples were shut down, and people were even punished or executed for practicing Buddhism. And then in recent times, since about the late 80s, then China kind of started opening up again. I think it was with the commercial opening up of China. They also started to open up the temples. And so there's been this huge revival in Buddhism in the East. And the Chinese have this very, very strong habit of making offerings. In fact, it's their kind of practice. They don't really like to meditate and do prostrations and things like that. But what they love to do is they just love to give temples and lamas money. And in many cases, then because they're so eager, then they get kind of conned by charlatans. There's a lot of con men out there, and they're basically in it just to get money off people. And because of that, then also along with this, then many people are developing a very negative view of teachers of the spiritual path. And that's because there's an awful lot of them who are basically just trying to get your money off you. So here's the scenario. Somebody is new to Buddhism, they become very enthusiastic, and so right away they want to start giving their money to a Dharma center or to a temple or to a Lama. And then, the Dharma teaches you should give up all worldly concerns, you should go forth. Well, yes, you should, but you shouldn't do these things until you're ready, right? If you're a single mother with children, you can't just run away to the mountains and start meditating. It's very difficult. Well, there's somebody online, her name's Nancy, and she knows all about this, right? Because she's a good mom, she's got kids, and she's also been involved in the spiritual path for many, many, many years. And she's seen it and done it all, so she knows all about this. So what happens in the Chinese scenario? Well, they start off, they become over-enthusiastic, they start giving money to their Lama. It's not certain whether this Lama is a charlatan or whether he's genuine. Eventually they give more. At some point they even sell their house and give that away as well. And maybe then they'll sort of take robes and try to go off into the mountains and meditate. But then, after a few months or a year, they realize they can't sustain that level of practice. And let's be honest, they've never studied, so they don't really know how to meditate anyway. And so they have to return to their worldly lives. But when they return, they're broke. They've given everything away. They've stopped their life, they've put the brake pedal on and stopped their life cold, gave everything away, and then later they basically had to return to worldly life because they no longer have any money, they can't feed themselves, and they've got to look for work. And so what happens? Well, their family get a really bad impression of the Dharma. They just start to think that all these lamas and teachers are just there to rip you off. And there's two really negative forms of karma. And one is the karma of abandoning the Dharma. So that's saying, this is rubbish, this is no good, this is all lies. You have that feeling about the Buddha Dharma, and that's said to be a very negative form of karma. And that's because once you develop this negativity towards the Dharma, it becomes habituated, and then lifetime after lifetime, the Dharma will not appear to you. You will not meet teachers. And the other really negative karma is the negative karma of selling the Dharma. So when you start kind of giving teachings for money, or, even selling books can be quite a difficult thing if you're making a lot of profit, When I say that, but most Dharma centers, well, what do? They're selling Dharma stuff, right? People sell malas and books, incense, and all this sort of stuff associated with the Dharma, and they do it, to make a living, basically. So it's difficult to say where this border is between kind of very innocently just trying to get by and selling the Dharma. It's something that I want to be very, very careful about. And so from the outset, I don't want to start off by asking people for favors, and also I don't want to start off by taking their money. And I don't need to, I'm not foolish about the way I do things. I'm starting off with a sort of scale and scope of plan that is achievable, right? Not trying to think big. Think what's practical. I mean, for what my objectives are, then it's unlikely that I'm going to find very many people who want to dedicate years of their life to serious practice. I mean, there aren't that many people who are able to do it. And when I say able, their life circumstances don't allow them to, right? They've got connections. They have elderly parents. They have children, etc. they have to look after. They might have pets, etc. So there's all kinds of reasons why you can't just go disappear into the mountains. So that's one obstacle. And the other one is that there's not that many people who actually want to do that. There are not that many people who are seeking liberation, who really want to get these kind of results that help you find emancipation from samsara. Most people are just looking for a feel-good factor, or to kind of get over some mundane trauma. And you don't need to go off into a cave and meditate just to kind of have a bit of psychological healing, right? This Dharma that's taught by people like Eckhart Tolle and Rupert Spira is really good at that. Just, rest in the present moment, don't worry about things. It makes you a calmer, more stable, kinder person. That's a start. We all have to start with these things. It's not like, somebody who goes off into a cave is really good and worldly people are really bad. It's not like that. We're all in this together, right? And we're all sort of in a different place, I was a householder. I was a totally worldly person with children and a wife and lots of work to do, It's only because of circumstances in my life that I was able to go into retreat. And to tell you the truth, I never, ever thought I'd be able to do it. I was always a very worldly person with lots of stuff to do. So, sometimes life turns out one way and sometimes it turns out another way. You can never really tell. And so that's why I always say you have to start with aspiration. You have to start with this good motivation. And in the Mahayana Dharma, that motivation is to achieve awakening for the sake of sentient beings. But it's not like we only have one lifetime. There's no need to be impatient. We just have to start with where we are. It's not like somebody who's going to go off for 5 years into a cave and meditate is necessarily better than anybody else. But the point I'm trying to make, and what I'm trying to achieve on my small scale in my meditation retreat, is to be able to support those people who are in the position to do that. And that's because, as far as I can see, these individuals are severely disadvantaged in the West, right? People who want to meditate a bit, want to change their life, maybe have a lifestyle change. People who have this kind of motivation have a lot of options in the West. And, our kind of logistics, our infrastructure is all set up for this kind of, it sounds bad, but spiritual materialism or spiritual tourism. Well, these things aren't necessarily bad. It has a lot to do with your motivation. But there's a lot of options there, right? You can buy all this Dharma stuff on Amazon now, and all the books are available to anybody. And the internet, YouTube, are just filled with Dharma teachings and talks about all kinds of spirituality. I mean, this New Age spirituality is a huge business, right, in the West. So people who have this kind of low level or kind of, I'd say, hobby interest in the Dharma have a lot of options. But the people who really want to dedicate themselves, who see an urgency to achieve something in this life, then they're really at a disadvantage. And there's not many choices or options for them. And in general, what happens is they have to kind of sacrifice their practice just to get by. And so I saw this as being something lacking in the West. And also, seeing that, I also saw that there are probably not that many people who, one, would be interested in that kind of lifestyle, and two, would be kind of at liberty to practice in a kind of intensive way over many years. And so I've planned everything on a kind of very doable scale. It's kind of very practically laid out, I'm not aiming for something huge. I mean, this is another problem that Dharma centers and monasteries and all these things run into, is the first thought is to do something really huge. And then in order to achieve that, they go out begging for money. From day one, then they have to raise millions of dollars to buy some huge, 100-acre place, and they're going to build a monastery and all this sort of stuff. And then what happens is people put their money into it, right? Lots of different people say, oh, that's a great idea. I think that's wonderful. Let me offer. And then you've got hundreds of people who've all pitched their money in. And 10, 20 years from now, if that venture hasn't gone the way they envisaged it to go, for example, if they start having disagreements the way the place is run, and then there's a lot of resentment that comes along with that. And if you make offerings to build a monastery, and then later you resent it, then there's no virtue in that, right? It no longer becomes virtue. You can only have virtue in making offerings to monasteries, lamas, and practitioners if it's done without any attachment, and then it's something positive. So that's from the side of somebody who's making offerings. So there's two things we have to think about here. There's the mindset of the individual who wants to make offerings, and then there's the mindset of the person who is receiving those offerings. And both those individuals have got a responsibility. The one making the offerings has to be very clear about their motivation, and they have to be totally without any attachment to that. They have to be giving selflessly with no thought of any return and no attachment to that money. Because if they have got this clinging, or if they've got some sort of self-concern wrapped up in making their offering, then 10, 20 years down the line, they may resent having made that offering. So all the karma is wasted. There's no virtue in that. And also it starts fights. And this is often what happens, 10, 20 years down the line, all these people who have a vested interest in the development of this spiritual community, if they become disgruntled, then the whole thing falls apart, especially if it gets into the hands of committees. Because in committees, you never achieve anything in the Dharma. Everybody's got their own ideas, and the focus is generally kind of monetary. It's about surviving financially. And so it's not about what's best for the spiritual path, what's best for Buddhism. It's about this kind of institution surviving. And so you see it. I mean, we have places here in British Columbia, places that have amazing potential, but either close down or don't really get used for anything. I mean, there's a place called the Hermitage, and it seemed like things were going really well. When I returned to the West from Nepal, I was expecting to see them up and running and thriving. They were talking about building a monastery and everything, and it'd been sold off. They couldn't function anymore. And I don't know the story, but it has a lot to do with this point of many people with a vested interest, committees, etc. And so it was just not manageable in the end. And there's another place which is like heavenly. It's just the most amazing location for a meditation retreat, for a Dharma center. But every time I've been there, it's empty. And as far as I know, all they do is they kind of hire it out for weekend groups, 1-week retreats. And it's not even Buddhist groups. It's like, kind of Hindu Lama or Christian meditators, etc. And that's good. It's good for those sort of groups to have somewhere to do their retreats. But as I said before, there's lots of scope for that. There's plenty of places you can hire out. If you and your yoga group want to do a week retreat, there's loads of options. All the logistics and everything is set up. But for somewhere that wants to be kind of a Dharma center, a specific meditation retreat, to survive is quite difficult. So what they do? Well, they rent the place out. You know, they rent the rooms out. And sometimes they're rented out for very worldly things, have nothing to do with the spiritual path. And I'm not dissing that. I'm not putting that down or denigrating them. There's a demand and a need for this sort of place, but there's an awful lot of them, is what I'm saying. And there's almost nowhere where you can go if you want to be really serious about your practice. I mean, you know Dorje, who's staying in the retreat right now, he has to spend like half the year working to save up money and then spend the rest of the year, like winter, somewhere where he can meditate. And he's just trying to manage his spiritual practice. So for most of us, we work our daytime job, and then we sort of do a couple of hours meditation in the morning, and a couple of hours meditation in the evening. We try to do some karma yoga, that sort of thing. And we just sort of manage our worldly lives and our spiritual life. And that's also really positive, right? All you people with children out there, all you people with spouses, you know, and etc. Then your dharma is to be a good person, you know, to have love for your family and be a positive influence in your community. And it's really important. We're all in this together. We've all got to come from various different angles to make this mundane world a better place, but also to seek liberation. And those people who are really going for it, then they're the people who are trying to develop kind of spiritual knowledge and also some experience on the path. And then eventually, when they get older, or maybe in the next life, then they can be of greater service and benefit to others based on their development of spiritual knowledge and experience in their practice. So it's this, you know, it's this latter group that I'm catering for. And again, I'm doing it because I see there's a great need there and they don't have a lot of options, you know, whereas the rest of us have loads of options, especially if you've got a bit of money or a good job. And so there are not going to be that many people anyway, so I can keep it small scale. And also somebody who's like a dedicated meditator doesn't need all kinds of fancy stuff. You know, we don't need it to be like a 5-star hotel. You can just stay in a little cabin somewhere in the woods, right? And have a solar panel or something like that. For those sort of people, they don't need fancy food. They don't need luxury, you know, all the mod cons, as they say in the UK, you know, things like internet and everything. And so it's something doable. I can manage that. And so I don't need you to worry about giving me money, and I won't take it anyway. If you do give your money away, I'm not suggesting you do. I'm saying save your money. But if you do, think about it well. Don't just give it away willy-nilly without considering the consequences. I mean, I mentioned Nancy before, right? Well, she had a great idea. She said to me, oh, you know, if I wasn't so far away, I'd come over and help you clean up. Now, that is a very good way of thinking. It's because she understands karma yoga. And she's been doing it for years. She used to like help out at the ashram. She's always like pitched in. That's a very sincere way to help your local Dharma community. Is pitch in some time, you know, wash the dishes or cook the food, etc. These kind of things are more benign. Well, there's less chance for them to go wrong. You still have to be careful about this. Like I said, I don't want to start off just by asking people favors, because it's the same. If somebody does a lot of work, I mean, we had this in the UK, in Scotland. You had a lot of people, and they did a lot of work, right? They built temples and all kinds of things. They used their skills, and they worked really hard for nothing. And so at the end of that, there's this kind of feeling, well, this is sort of ours. We should be able to dictate what gets done here. Well, the problem is, in a spiritual community, the person who's kind of dictating the way things go needs to have this Dharma outlook. You know, they need to be focused on what's important. And as far as I can see, what's important in the West, if we want spirituality to flourish, then we need people with experience. Eventually, we need people with kind of spiritual knowledge and meditative experience. And in places like Tibet, and Nepal and India, then they do have these individuals, right? They have a long tradition of, you know, siddhas and babas meditators, lamas, rinpoches, etc. People who lifetime after lifetime have developed spiritual qualities. I mean, look at Indian history, for God's sake. Gandhi was a politician, right? But look at him, he dressed like an ascetic. So there's this ingrained kind of tradition or culture within the East of these sort of spiritual seekers. Not only that, then there are many people who have got experience, who know what they're talking about, and who act as a guiding light for others. But we're kind of new to all of this in the West. My feeling is, if in the future we expect the spiritual path to flourish, then we're going to need people who've got a lot of experience under their belt, and who aren't just sort of repeating trite statements, you know, not just sort of repeating things you read in poetry books about New Age spirituality. That's not going to get us anywhere. You know, that's just like buying incense and stuff. It has no lasting effect. And it also won't change our society and our culture in any significant way. What we need is transcendent knowledge and not mundane knowledge. And so we do our bit. We spread love in our communities, make sure our children grow up well, be a good mom, be a good dad, be a good neighbor, become a stable individual, meditate when you can. And also we can sort of help those who want to achieve something on the spiritual path, right? We can all work together. And then what will happen? In the end, then our world will improve. There'll be more love and there'll be more compassion. And so the Buddha was very specific about this. The Buddha said that lay people, for them, the most important thing to do was to practice the first 2 paramitas out of the 6 paramitas. And so they should practice generosity and discipline. And that sounds a bit strange, because generally we think like monks and nuns should practice discipline. But monks and nuns are starting from the 3rd stage, patience upwards. So presumably, through taking vows, then they've already worked out the discipline. So what it means is that the lay people need to use their funds towards positive things, you know, helping out the poor, etc. It kind of makes society more caring and more sort of stable. And also to watch their conduct, because within the lay communities, there's a lot of scope there for negativity, right? Like a monk or a nun is already not supposed to kill and steal and all that and engage in sexual misconduct. And so there's a lot of scope within mundane circles, within employed people, people with families, etc., to conduct themselves in a very virtuous way. And as I said, that starts off with spreading love and compassion and being helpful to your neighbors, you know, supportive in the community and that sort of thing. And it's absolutely essential. You know, without the foundations, the building won't stand. So if we want to build this golden temple, well, it's not going to work without these sort of very coarse bricks and things that we put in the foundations. So they're absolutely necessary. They're in no way are they unnecessary. The structure of the golden temple will not survive without all those elements, right? The golden roof is not just going to hold up itself in midair. That's kind of the way we think about spirituality in the West. We just think about the golden roof and forget about everything else, you know. We think we don't have to worry about our discipline. We think we don't have to be diligent, you know. We think we don't have to have sort of people who have spiritual experience. We just want this really, really high view of everyone as Buddha. Well, that's mistaken. We need every element to be in place if our societies are going to become more enlightened. And I really appreciate the thought. I think it's very kind of you to want to support what I'm doing. But please save your money. And especially if you're a practitioner, if you're a meditator, you're going to need it, right? It's really difficult in the West to meditate. So if you've got some money, then don't spend it frivolously on all this material junk that's everywhere. You know, you can get anything in the world on Amazon. Just save your money, be careful with it, you know, protect your property, and then use that to support yourself in your spiritual practice, whatever that is, you know. Even if you don't like meditating, as long as you've got that financial security, then you're there to be of benefit to others. You can become a servant to the people. And if you want to meditate, and you can do what Dorji's doing, right? He's careful about his money and he makes sure that he can meditate a certain amount throughout the year, whether that be, you know, 4 hours a day, 2 hours a day, or maybe you can only manage to do a couple of week retreats. You just invest your time and go to see people who are kind of knowledgeable and people who have experience, on the path, and don't follow what's kind of trendy. Like these sort of Dharma groups, they've got lots of people in them. And it's very easy to get sucked into this herd mentality. Do a bit of homework, find something authentic. And generally, there's a few signs. Like if somebody's trying to tell you, you don't need to practice, you don't need to study, then I would be very suspicious about that. Because it sounds to me like they're just trying to pander to my laziness. I'd love everything to be easy. I'd love it to be just like, well, it's nothing to do, and you don't have to give up anything. That's what we want to hear, right? It's sweet talk. But I'm very kind of skeptical about that. I mean, I used to drink too much. I used to take drugs, and my life was not better. And so me thinking, what does it matter? Get drunk, do what you like, go to the movies. That's not going to help me. It's just going to eat up my time and my resources, and it's going to make me less mentally stable. And in the long run, that sort of thing just leads to kind of mental illness. It's not just the drink and the drugs. It's just needing stimulus and entertainment, right? It makes people very small-minded. If there's more things you need just to get by, then you're going to be more small-minded. It's very difficult. They say you need to be easily satisfied in a few desires, and it's such a profound teaching. So if you save your money, and then you meditate a bit more, or do karma yoga like Nancy, whatever you do, then you're engaging in virtue and you're developing a virtuous mindset. You're becoming a mini bodhisattva. So I'm not going to go on anymore. It's just something I wanted to say. And I'll thank you again. You're so kind. But keep your money, please. I won't take it. And, sometime in the future, we might meet face to face. And then I can thank you. Or you can buy me a coffee when we go out. So, thank you for listening, and see you next time.